I survived the California wildfires, Chapter 6 and 7. 3 nights later, Friday, July 20th, 2018, Holly's house, around 6:30 p.m. Josh reached across the picnic table for another taco. "Josh," Mom laughed, "that's your third one." "Fourth," Josh said, smiling at Aunt Nicole. "These are the best tacos I've ever had." A pink tongue shot up and snatched a piece of lettuce from the air as it tumbled from Josh's taco. "Looks like Bubbles likes tacos too," Mom said. More laughter rose up, and a warm feeling spread from Josh's head to his toes. Mom had the right idea to come out here. Josh missed Dad a ton, and it was weird not to be able to text Greg 20 times a day. But Mom was already back to her old self, and Josh felt calmer than he had in over a week. He looked at Holly, who smiled at him over her taco. She was definitely different. Holly had never played a video game in her life. She could name every bird that flew by, but not one basketball player. "Who's that?" she asked the other day, pointing at the picture of LeBron James on Josh's t-shirt. "You've never heard of LeBron James, the greatest player in the NBA?" "I don't really care about basketball," Holly shrugged. Josh just shook his head, because what could he even say? But somehow he and Holly got along. Unsurprisingly, it wasn't boring here, even without TV or video games or YouTube. He and Holly hung out with Bubbles and watched King Kong. They stuffed their faces with Aunt Nicole's brownies and cookies, and they spent the rest of the time roaming around the forest behind the house. Hiking wasn't so bad, it turned out. Josh actually felt a little scared at first, being in the middle of a massive forest. He kept thinking of a movie he and Greg had watched where two kids got lost for weeks. They stay alive by eating grasshoppers and moss. But Holly knew her way around. They brought plenty of cookies and thermoses of lemonade, and sometimes they saw cool stuff, like a huge spider covered with fur and a hawk flying overhead with a mouse gripped in its feet. It was a bummer they weren't allowed to swim in the river. Holly said it was too dangerous to swim without a grown-up watching them. That really stank, because there was an old zip line stretching across the river. It was attached to this big tree right on the riverbank. If Josh had a zip line in his backyard, he and Greg would be on it 24/7. Too bad Holly wasn't the zip line type. She'd never even been on it. Josh was finishing up his rice and beans when a dusty red pickup truck came zooming down the driveway. "It's Lucas and Eleanor," Holly exclaimed, rushing off the porch to greet the man and woman who got out. "You'll love these two," Aunt Nicole said to Mom. "They're great friends of ours. They help us with the reptile shelter. Eleanor actually grew up with Hector." Hector was Holly's dad, Josh knew. He'd died from cancer about 3 years ago, Mom had said. Holly had mentioned him a few times, her voice proud and sad at the same time. He seemed like a great guy. Eleanor greeted Josh with a booming hello and a crushing hug. Lucas was quieter, but still super friendly. "Join us for dinner," Aunt Nicole said, clearing away space for 2 more plates. But Eleanor shook her head. "We'd love to, but we're zonked. And we need a shower. We must stink of smoke." "We just finished the shift at the fire station," Lucas added. 4 days on duty without a break." "Wow," Josh thought. "Firefighters." "We have to go back for another shift tomorrow," Eleanor said. "We just stopped by to drop off a special supper for King Kong." She held up a shoebox wrapped in tape with holes punched through the top. Josh could hear noises coming from inside the box. "Squeak, squeak, squeak." "Nice big rat for his dinner," Lucas said. "Someone trapped it at the station in our pantry." Holly looked at Josh. "Pythons only eat live prey." Josh winced. He wanted King Kong to have a good dinner, but it was too bad for the rat that snakes didn't like tacos. "King Kong will love it," Holly said to Lucas. "He's having a tough time with his shedding." "Well, hopefully this cheers him up," Lucas said. "I'll be right back." He took the box and headed to the garage. Eleanor sat down with them at the table, and Josh grabbed another taco, but he'd barely taken a bite when Lucas's voice rang out from the garage. "Hey!" he called urgently. "Everyone come quick!" They all stood up and raced toward the garage. Bubbles stuck close to Josh, following him like a scampering puppy. Josh braced himself for a gruesome sight. He knew King Kong was chill, but Holly had told him some pythons could be dangerous. They weren't venomous like rattlesnakes or cobras. They killed their prey by squeezing them to death. Plus, they had strong jaws and sharp teeth. They found Lucas standing in front of King Kong's enclosure, looking fine. No bite or strangle marks that Josh could see, but Lucas had a worried expression on his face. "What is it?" Aunt Nicole asked, glancing around. Lucas didn't answer. He just pointed to the enclosure. Josh searched for the snake, but King wasn't on his log. He wasn't lying on his bed of leaves either. Somehow, the massive python had vanished into thin air. Chapter 7. "Look at this," Lucas called from the back corner of King's enclosure a few minutes later. "Loose board in the floor. King must have managed to pry it up with his head and slip out." They got Bubbles into her enclosure and started the search for the snake. Josh used a rake to gently rustle the bushes around the garage. He squinted in the late evening sun, knowing that King would be hard to spot. His dark green and yellow gold skin was an almost perfect match to the crunchy dried up grass around the house. Josh had moved on to some bushes on the far side of the house when Aunt Nicole called them over to the bird feeder. "I found something!" she shouted. They gathered around her, and she held up what looked like a beige sock, a very long, very dry, very shriveled beige sock. "King Kong finally shed his skin," Holly said. Aunt Nicole nodded. "I found it in the dirt right over there." "That's probably why he wanted to get out," Holly said. "When pythons are kept in captivity, it's harder for them to shed. They need to move across rough ground to get their skin off." Josh's mind flashed to something Holly had told him about pythons, that in the wild they love to move around. Poor King had spent his whole life cooped up, first with his old owner and now in the pen in Holly's garage. Holly and Aunt Nicole took good care of him, but still. Josh's hands clenched tighter around his rake as he realized that Holly was right. It was cruel to keep these wild reptiles as pets. Holly gently took the crinkly-looking skin from her mouth. "I'm keeping this," she said. Yikes, Josh thought. Snakes were cool, but keeping a snake's skin would be like saving old toenails or something. He definitely wouldn't want the skin hanging around his house. Mom shot Josh a cringy look. She agreed. Holly stashed King's skin in the garage, and they searched for a little while longer. When it was dark enough that they had to use flashlights, Aunt Nicole called them all together. "We're never going to spot King in the dark," she said. "My guess is he's found a hole, an animal burrow, to curl up in underground. Some rabbit or woodchuck is going to come home to a terrible surprise, but King will be safe. No animal around here would mess with a big python." "But what about mountain lions?" Holly asked worriedly. Josh's eyes went wide. "You have mountain lions here?" "They keep to themselves," Lucas said, "and I'm pretty sure a mountain lion would be smart enough not to bother King Kong." As they made their way through the dusky darkness, Josh glanced over his shoulder at the forest, which seemed to stretch on forever. King Kong was out there. Mountain lions, too. What else was lurking in these woods? He shuddered and walked a little faster toward the house.